I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to the newest episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, grab your web shooters and come join me for the ultimate swing as I review Spider-Man's Homecoming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thankfully, the plot is not another origin story. Instead, it's about Peter Parker, played by Tom Holland, trying to balance his school life in addition to his life as Spider-Man. He's trying to earn the respect of his mentor Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr., and he sees his chance of doing so by stopping a gang of weapons dealers led by Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes, also known as the Vulture. And along the way, he's also got to balance his school life as well, taking part in the decathlon team, and also a homecoming dance that's coming up. Typical teenage stuff, basically. Well, here we are again, another Spider-Man reboot. Except this time the character is thankfully a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is something I've been looking forward to ever since I was a kid, but for the longest time it seemed like it was just never going to happen. Sony Pictures were pretty adamant they would not let the rights to the character revert back to Marvel, but nevertheless, it did happen. After Andrew Garfield left the role, they brought on Tom Holland to play the character in Captain America Civil War, which served as his unofficial introduction to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he sure made a very good impression there. He was one of that movie's many highlights, managing to capture the spirit of the character near flawlessly. So I was pretty excited for this movie, but at the same time I was pretty apprehensive about it because it is another Spider-Man reboot, and also Sony Pictures is a company that's pretty infamous for meddling in their properties, especially Spider-Man properties, which isn't helped by the fact that they're run by the king of meddlers, Tom Rothman, the man who thought that sewing Deadpool's mouth shut was a good idea. Lord knows what he has planned for Spider-Man. Be very afraid. Thankfully though, Spidey's introduction to the MCU does have a lot of great things going for it. For one, Tom Holland absolutely kills it, once again, both as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. Whereas other actors I feel are a better Peter Parker than a Spider-Man and vice versa, Tom Holland manages to get the best of both worlds in my opinion. He manages to bring out the dorkier and geekier aspects as Peter Parker, but he also brings a much needed sense of vulnerability to the role as well. And I like the way he's written this movie. He's written as almost very childlike, he's overly enthusiastic, he's got big aspirations, he's very excited about being part of this bigger world, but you can also get the impression that he's bitten off a bit more than he can actually chew. And as Spider-Man, he's absolutely brilliant. He manages to get the wisecracking aspects of the character down to a T. But at the same time, the movie never forgets that even with the suit on, he's still just a kid. And that's reflected in how he does tend to make some mistakes every once in a while. Like, for instance, he'll shoot a web to try and grab onto something and he realises he'll have nothing to grab onto. Or he'll try swinging through a neighbourhood or something and he'll fall into a pool. It's funny and it is very humorous, but at the same time it highlights how fallible and vulnerable Spider-Man is. In terms of scale and scope, this movie is a lot smaller than some of the past MCU movies. There's no scenes of cities being lifted into the sky or battles with robots or aliens. There's no madman who wants to destroy the world with a big bomb or anything like that. It's a much more grounded and down-to-earth movie, and I remember back when I first heard about this movie, I remember they did name drop John Hughes as an inspiration, and I definitely believe that, because this movie mostly feels like a teen movie that just happens to have superheroes in it. And I even referenced John Hughes at one point by paying homage to the chase scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off and also having it play on the television in the background. I thought that was a pretty cute touch. And that approach to the material mostly works very well. You can really feel the influence of John Hughes in the way that the film is written, which is quite impressive considering the movie has 6 credited writers, and yet it never feels like a case of too many cooks in the kitchen. I can certainly think of other movies that came out this summer that certainly did feel that way. But despite the film's considerably smaller scale, at least when compared to other MCU outings, the film still has those crowd-pleasing moments and scenes of spectacle that only the Marvel Cinematic Universe can do. But they're mostly quite spaced out, and the film as a whole isn't very heavy on action. And whenever there is action in the film, it's more about tension and suspense as opposed to bombast and how much shit you can blow up in 10 minutes. There are some scenes that did genuinely have me on the edge of my seat, and that ferry sequence that we all saw in the trailer, where Spider-Man's trying to stop the ferry from sinking, is definitely one of the movie's main highlights because it's one of those scenes that does push Spider-Man to his limits. And it's also a nice callback to that scene in Spider-Man 2 where he's trying to save the train, but redone enough so that it doesn't feel like a blatant copy of that sequence. One of the main problems with the later Spider-Man films is that they felt so overstuffed. They would often shoehorn in characters from the comics just for gratuitous fan service, or the films themselves would feature lots of plot threads that go nowhere or just are there to set up future movies. And this movie did have the potential to feel that way because it has a huge cast, but it somehow doesn't. I'm certainly thankful for that, This movie is probably the most focused Spider-Man movie we've gotten in quite some time. Even with the large amount of characters and villains, yes, this movie does have more than one villain, and I'll get to that. But first, let's talk about the main villain in this movie, Vulture. Personally, he's one of my favourite Spider-Man villains, and considering Spider-Man has a lot of great villains, that really is saying something. And it's great to finally see him on the big screen. He's probably one of my favourite Spider-Man movie villains, as well as one of my favourite MCU villains. I don't know, between this and Guardians of the Galaxy 2, it seems like Marvel is finally trying to rectify its villain issue. Let's hope they can keep it up with Infinity War and Thor Ragnarok coming soon. Anyway, Vulture is a great villain. You can understand his motivations, and he is somewhat sympathetic at times, but he definitely does do a lot of questionable things throughout the movie, and he's downright scary at points, and Keaton is absolutely fantastic in the parts. As for the rest of the villains, they're pretty decent. Bokeem Woodbine and Logan Marshall Green both do pretty good playing different versions of the Shocker. Michael Cernus is alright as the Tinker, a Spider-Man villain who I'm not overly familiar with. Michael Mando was also quite great as Matt Gargan, aka the Scorpion, even though he's not in the movie that much. But these villains feel more like secondary characters. They're more like the villain's henchmen than outright villains, if you know what I mean. It's not like Spider-Man 3 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which had all these villains running around with very different motivations and they barely even interacted with each other. They all play second fiddle to Keaton, which I think is for the better, but at the same time, they're not stock villains. They all feel somewhat fleshed out, and they do have some degree of personality. Now let's talk about Tony Stark's role in the film. He sort of serves as an unofficial father figure to Spider-Man. I like the way the relationship was presented between them, because you can tell he sees a lot of himself in Peter, but at the same time he's also trying to make sure that Peter doesn't make the same mistakes that he made. He's a very different Tony Stark to the one that was in some of the past MCU outings. This is very much a continuation of the Tony Stark we saw in Civil War, for instance, the more broken, hurt, and emotionally shattered version of Tony Stark that we saw in that film. You can tell that the events of these movies have taken their toll on him to an extent, and Downey's terrific as usual in the parts. However, he's not in the movie that much. He's certainly not in the movie nearly as much as the marketing would have you think. He mostly takes a backseat to the movie. And I do want to talk about the movie's marketing because it did affect my opinion on the movie somewhat. Trust me, I have a good reason for wanting to talk about that. The rest of the cast all do a very good job too. It's nice to see Jon Favreau back as Happy Hogan from the Iron Man movies. And he's given a pretty prominent role in the film, definitely a lot more prominent than Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. He serves as Peter's minder, and he's written quite out of character in this movie. I remember in the Iron Man movies he was sort of serves as light comic relief. He's not much of a comic relief, but he is definitely written differently than he was in the Iron Man films. He's very frustrated by Peter's antics, and he often finds them quite annoying, but he plays it quite well, and Favreau is mostly quite enjoyable in the parts. Marissa Tomei once again returns as Aunt May, and I think she does a really good job of the part, even if she is pushed into the background for a lot of the movie. And unfortunately that's also true for a lot of the actors in this movie. I've already talked about how a lot of the villains in this movie feel more like supporting characters, but even actors like Tyne Daly and Donald Glover, who are given prominent billing, I think they're only in the movie for about 4 or 5 minutes at the most. The rest of the cast are mostly quite enjoyable too. For instance, Jacob Batalon as Peter's friend Ned. He's funny and he does have some entertaining scenes, and he has good chemistry with Tom Holland in the scenes they have together, and he does mostly manage to avoid the feeling of being sidelined. Laura Harrier as Peter's crush Liz does do a pretty decent job. She does have good chemistry with Holland, but other than that she doesn't really have a whole lot to do, and she does feel more like a supporting character. Tony Revolori is actually surprisingly good as Flash Thompson, the bully. Yeah, I know there's a lot of hoo-ha about that, and he doesn't exactly resemble Flash Thompson from the comics or even the past Spider-Man movies. But Revolori does a pretty good job in the part, I think. And the basic idea behind the character is still intact. He bullies Peter, but at the same time he idolizes Spider-Man. So it's not like he's playing a completely different character. However, there is one weak link in the film's cast, and that's Zendaya as the character of Michelle. She wasn't really bad per se, but I just didn't really like the character very much. She's always been rude, making snide or condescending remarks to other characters for no real reason. And I think the idea behind the character is that you're supposed to get the film she forms a connection with Peter and Ned throughout the film, that the three become friends or something, but I just didn't feel that at all. I didn't get that connection. It also doesn't help that there's barely any scenes between her and Holland, and whenever there are, I don't even think they share a sentence together. And just like most of the other characters in this movie, she ends up feeling very sidelined, which is again really weird because she's given prominent billing in the film's marketing, and she's on all the posters. Even though she does virtually nothing throughout the entire film and is a supporting character at best. But I have to admit, in addition to its supporting cast being sidelined for much of its running time, I do have other things to mention. For one, I was quite impressed with how they brought back some of the characters from past Marvel movies and even referenced some of the events of the previous films. But I do think they get a little bit carried away with it. It's almost like they get to the point where there's like, no, seriously, this is a Marvel movie. This isn't a Sony-based Spider-Man movie. This is a Marvel movie, and Spider-Man is in it. Please believe it. Please listen. This is a Marvel movie. And then you're just kind of getting to the point where it's just like, okay, we get it. Shut up about it. Get on with the movie and quit referencing past Marvel movies, would you, for crying out loud. It's almost to the point where you're just waiting for Deadpool to show up and say something like, it's almost like the studio couldn't afford another Avenger. Another major thing about this movie is that it does play things very safe. It's very much in a comfort zone. So if you're going in expecting a bold new take on the Spider-Man character, don't do that. I think you will be quite disappointed if that's the case. But that's not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. It's very much trying to do what The Force Awakens is trying to do. Trying to re-establish trust in a brand that has been tarnished somewhat. And I think it does that quite well in that regard. I think it does do a good job of laying the groundwork for future movies to build upon. That is if Sony will actually let Marvel do that. Finally, last but not least, let's talk about the movie's marketing. This is something I don't normally talk about unless I think I have a very good reason for doing so. But in this case, I do have a good reason for it because I think it did affect my opinion on the movie a bit. And keep in mind, in this part of the video, I think I am going to give away a few spoilers, so if you don't want to hear anything about the movie, skip to this point in the video, and here goes. Basically, if you've seen the trilogy, you know there's a scene where Spider-Man has to save a lot of people on board a ferry, and a really good money shot that's kind of like the scene in Spider-Man 2 where he's trying to save the train. And that's all they really should have shown, I think. Instead, the trailer shows Iron Man coming in to help him save the day, and then he chews him up for his recklessness and takes the suit away. Not a bad idea. It forces Spider-Man to rely on his own homemade suit. But the problem is that they really shouldn't have shown it in the damn trailer. And I'm not gonna lie, it did affect my opinion on the movie somewhat, I think. Because now you know what's going to happen. There's no real surprises. There's no real twists or turns to the exception of maybe the reveal of the Vulture's true identity and his connection to a certain character. But that's really about it. I've already mentioned that Tony Stark is not in the movie that much, but the marketing would have you believe otherwise. So much so that there's even a scene in the trailers where Spider-Man and Iron Man are alongside each other, Spider-Man's swinging and Iron Man's flying. Yeah, that shot's not actually in the film, at any point. That doesn't even happen in the film's climax. They don't team up to stop the Vulture or anything like that. I'll admit that didn't particularly bother me personally, but I think some people might be a little put off by that. But despite my little issues with the film that aren't even really its fault, I did really enjoy Spider-Man Homecoming for the most part. It serves as a very solid introduction with the characters of the MCU, and a smaller scale works very well with more of a focus on suspense and tension and action, as opposed to lots of CGI and destruction. And it also does a really good job of showing Spider-Man develop throughout the film. But as much as I really want to love the film, I'm sorry, there are a few things that do hold it back for me. Namely, it's largely underutilized supporting cast and some issues that aren't even really its fault. It's just a personal bias, and I openly admit that, but it is a bias that did affect my opinion on the movie somewhat. Despite that, I still think it's quite good, and I'm going to give Spider-Man Homecoming a solid 7 out of 10. I definitely recommend seeing it. I think if Marvel and Sony can get on well together, I think we can get some more really good Spider-Man movies, and some of the sequels I think can really build upon the potential offered here. But before I wrap up the video, let's take a look at the MCU scale and see where Spider-Man Homecoming ranks on it. I would probably put it slightly below Ant-Man. It's not quite my favourite Spider-Man film, but considering Spider-Man 2 is one of my all-time favourite films, that's definitely a tough act to follow. But I will say one thing about the movie, it's definitely the best Spider-Man movie we've gotten since those two Sam Raimi movies from back in the day. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it's a little longer than usual, I just had a lot more to write about this time around for some reason. Just how long was this video exactly? Whoa. Sorry, I hope my next video is a little shorter, sorry about that. But in the meantime, feel free to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. I'll be back soon with reviews for It Comes at Night, War for the Planet of the Apes, Dunkirk, and several others hopefully. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.